/x/sucks tonight, can we get a decent Innowoods thread going? I got a story. Be prepper. Since I constantly go keyboard commando, and it's happening season, bail to Appalachia. I took a 4-day kit and AM1 Garand with 384 FMJ. Enough tactical grubbery, it's where it got real. Hiking along, stopping to check the compass about 250 yards or so. Notice some scraping on the trees, about a week old. I presume it's a bear, and this is a territory marking. Get a bit nervous, keep walking. About 400 yards ahead downhill, sound of water. Avi. About to get some water, guess what the breeze delivered to my nose? A fucking scully. It's a white-tailed doe, limply rotting on a tree stump. Same scrapping too, but fresher by a few days. Not today, mother lover. Go uphill some more and follow the highway a little to close for my comfort. Set up a tarp tent combo. Night night. Soundless sleep. Wake to sunrise, not birds. Pack up, and keep on. Snack on homemade MRE at 9:21, notice the birds are getting the hell out from across the highway. I just load the rifle. After burying the MRE, and sloppily closing the bottom compartment of my backpack. Move further away from highway. Some cars, just some big rigs. My schnoz is alert. Wafting, wafting. Yep, another dead animal. My ears hear some crunching. Bring rifle to shoulder, engage tacti-cool mode. Begin looking to the sound, it's from the same bearing as the diaspora of avians. Reach down, throw a rock at a sapling. Shit gets silent, yo. Not ready for any bear fight, and concerned my 30-06 isn't going to be enough, go up a tree. Like literally up a tree in ultimate nope mode. Look down, through the foliage, see leaves. Then a large mossy mass, hunched over on all fours, meanders to the sapling. Clamp down lungs, not gonna let it hear me. Watch as Mossy gets bored, and begins knocking lightly on nearby oaks. Eventually he gets to mine, sweat is intense. Knock knock motherfucker. Knocking intensifies, and my gear isn't synced right cause of breakfast. I know what you are thinking, something falls out, he notices, walking of dinosaur. Mossy fellow still knocking hard enough that I can feel the tree move a bit. Not good. Mossy dude is done knocking, he goes off to an adjacent tree. It's some kind of thick oak, low branches and large budding spring leaves. Mossy guy is tapping away. Mossy guy is hitting that tree. Pound it ma mossy nigga. Nah, he keeps that chill steady tap going. Then I blink. One dead doe where Mossy bro was. I'm not having none of this jewelry. Stay up there in the tree long into the next day. Set up a improv hammock too. Finally accept that Mossy bro is gone, I begin my descent. It's 11:08 am. Hand over hand, move foot. It's 11:13. Assume my wristwatch is broken, time to abort my mission. Finally get down, it's 11:16. Staring at me on the very same tree I was on is a large scraping. Crap. Something odd here, LE tree has already begun to bark over. Heck time. Frick this, check watch 11:20. Hike to road, plan to get to a mile marker and call a not Mossy bro to drive out and get me. Since I'm still carrying a full rifle, two can't be seen holding it near the road. Damn liberals. Reach highway, it's 12:02. Assume watch is shitardade. Open smartphone. It's 12:05. Assume smartphone is shitard too. Call bro, he's 20 minutes away. Checking watch constantly, even though I haven't ate since yesterday night, not gonna open the last MRE. See brother's car coming up. I load my pack in his back seat, and the M1 Garand in he floorboard. Call shotgun, some joking, drive off. Last thing I saw in that stretch of woods that day was the birds flying off from the forest behind the same mile marker I was waiting at. I'll do this then. This was 2 nights ago. I got back from watching Iron Man 3. It's 12:14. Grab a smoke and light it up. Look towards the wooded area by my house because I like looking in there. Decide out of the blue to grab a flashlight and walk around in it. It's rather small foliage, not more than maybe 5 acres, the rest has been torn down due to housing. There are 2 abandoned houses in there. Walk around and check out houses, only being scared of spiders. First one is directly across the street, so I don't stay long because I see it every day. Go to the second house which is in the middle of the wooded part. Never really looked around in it. Roof is caved in, parts of the house are thrown about, furniture is still inside, looks like a crushed doll house. Step inside the tiny entryway. Decide to be tough boy and shout if there are spirits here, then show me a sign. Right after I say that I hear a low loud growl, it was comparable to a roar but lower and more throaty. Turn my flashlight in the direction of the sound and see a man in a hood. His face was covered by something, may or may not be a hood. Turn and nope the hell out. Run back home and lock my doors. Look outside through my window, and see nothing. Relieved it didn't follow me. Not super spooky, but it just happened and shook me a bit. Okay. So as I was saying, getting ready for Inawoods fun, got my gear, and getting all settled, making sure my animals have enough food till I get back. Now that I had all my gear all set, I am ready to head out and go for the walk to my destination. When I walked out of my house door and got done making sure the animals had enough food for the 3 days, I started to walk when I noticed that they were all acting up, such as my dog kept staring at a tree, which actually looked pretty suspicious and gave off a creepy vibe, and that my chickens were just not doing anything, as if they had just turned to stone, plus my cat kept staring out the house window looking at the tree. I just decided to ignore the feeling, but decided to grab 5 extra arrows just in case. So now I started to begin my walk towards the location of the woods I was going to camp in, and when I was walking through the field to get there, I just could not stop looking behind me, kept thinking that something was following me with the intent of trying to harm me, but I just shrugged it off as me being paranoid. Within 30 to 46 minutes I had gotten to the destination, finally happy that I felt refreshed and enjoyed that I was going to be in this fresh, nice woods, but of course with every ounce of something good there is also bad things hiding among the good ones, and that's when I looked at the clouds. Mushroom clouds, tall and limbering, grouping together and getting ready to form a storm, so as soon as I saw this I thought that I should probably get my tent up as soon as I can, then possible hunt and check what else I can find. Maybe some cool scenery, maybe a cave. So I had set up my tent and still had time before the storm would be near me at all, so I went hunting for some animals, luckily got myself a rabbit I could cook and found some berries that were safe to eat, and actually tasted pretty good, so I made a tiny little rabbit and berry soup. After just sitting around for 15 minutes I noticed that the storm had completely passed over me and, luckily, had not ruined my day of exploring, so I thought that I should go looking for some scenery or more of those delicious berries or another rabbit. When I was walking around I got that feeling of something tracking me down again, but it left quickly. All in all, I only caught 2 more rabbits and a handful of those berries and left for the tiny makeshift camp I built earlier. Now I was at the camp and it was about 10:23, so I decided to just have another bowl of soup along with berry-flavored water to wash it down, and then I just fell asleep. I woke up to something eerie yet familiar. It was a blood-freezing scream, so loud and so horrible that I just froze in place and heard the sound of another scream, that of a small rabbit. Then there was the sound of blood spilling and bones crushing, then slurping. Doing what could have gotten me killed, I looked out of the bottom of the tent flap. I saw something that made me just want to run to the hills and never stop running after that. When I looked out, I saw this sorta 6'7" looking black and grey creature, slurping on that poor bunny's blood and guts. Then it just threw it towards a branch and spiked it. When the rabbit was finally dead and the creature was satisfied with its food, it started walking towards my tent. I slowly backed away to where the sleeping bag was, and pulled it over me so I could try to hide and not meet my death, and just stayed still. It was there, sniffing and looking around, apparently unhappy that I wasn't there, letting out yet another scream, and since I could hear it so close, it sounded like this. Imagine the sound from every monster from Amnesia combined, and played backwards while a tiny high-pitched scream, hard to hear, was heard along with it. After those following events, I took a not-so-comfortable nap and only got 30 minutes in. So I just thought how wonderful it would be to just go hunting to ease my mind off, and I was walking when all of a sudden a moose just bolts as fast as it can across a clearing and then it was gone. I looked to see what spooked it and there it was. Just standing there, looking me dead in the eyes, and as if it couldn't get worse. It smiled, started waving like I was his friend that he hadn't seen in a long time. Tired of this thing trying to taunt me, I decided to shoot it in the elbow and then boom, it started wailing its arm and screaming, all the while looking at me. I guess this thing was now pissed and it started running towards me, and it was actually pretty fast, but I managed to get it in the knee and it fell pretty hard, so now that I had the chance to start running from this, I took the chance and did. Never stopped running, and by the time I reached the field, I took a breath and looked to see if it was following me. It wasn't near me, but I saw it near the edge of the woods, just sitting there and smiling again, so I just up and left as fast as I could. So now I was heading home thinking about what kind of gun I should get, as using my bow was not the best thing to use if I went in a woods again. So, now I was home and I noticed that the tree was gone. The fricking tree was gone. It was watching me walk the entire time, blending in with the trees. And that concludes what happened when I went in a woods. Hope that thing is dead by now, and I did try to go there again and find it, but it either left or went off into hiding or died. Speaking of in a woods, any of you guys got a good recommendation for a new weapon? Been thinking of just getting a crossbow or maybe handgun. All in all, it was fun times in the woods until Creep McDead showed up. I also forgot to mention what the creature looked like, and the only interesting features about it was the fact that it had long sharp claws, its skin was tight on its entire body, grey/black for its color, slits for eyes, and its head looked like a hybrid of a human/animal, couldn't tell. Beowulf/human hybrid for military/government. Escape during field testing exercise. Return home. Can't venture into town because this monster I have become. Sit on wood line eating whatever animals I can find, watching family/friends. Old friend and school buddy ventures into my woods. Keeps looking over shoulder, seems nervous/scared, decide to leave him till he feels comfortable at camp. Decide not to bother him that day, let him calm down a bit. Next morning wake up as sun is arriving. Travel to his camp. Still not awake, decide to wait. See rabbit and animal instincts kick in, scream and jump on rabbit, scoffing it down in a frenzy. See tent flap open/no one inside, just usual camping stuff. Guess he booked it into the woods during frenzy, tummy groans, decide rabbit wasn't enough breakfast. Be a little while later, stalking a moose, goddamn thing hears me snap a branch under my foot and bolts. Target engaged, engines to 100%. Not 20 seconds after engagement, moose almost bowls over friend. Engines 0%, brakes 100%. Decide to keep my distance as people won't understand. JPG. Smile and wave at him in most humanly way possible. Mother lover's jaw drops, raises his bow and shots me in the elbow. Crap. No cover. Decide in a split second I can disarm him before he can draw a second arrow. Damn nigga, quick with a bow. Used to be an adventurer before I took an arrow to the knee. Avi.mkv.jpg. Drop to ground and douche, ex-friend, books it the hell out of there. Didn't get to say hi or catch up, wounds start to get infected a few days later. Decide I need help, called HO incoming chopper. Tell HO I got lost for the last week and wandered home to see my family. Fast forward a week, see this thread, start reading. I thought you were tough, bro, I thought you were tough. Be me, around 9. Explore back of neighborhood, which is surrounded by woods with black friend. We would goof around and do stupid crap like throw rocks at older kids. Older kid didn't like this very much and chased us deep into the woods. We outrun him and he turns around. I don't perfectly recall the events that followed suit, it is pretty hard for me to believe what I saw exactly. Me and black friend are lost, but feeling fearless. Although, we've never been this far back in the woods, we still push forward. The woods are pretty typical, about 3 feet of space between trees, not a lot of overgrown foliage. Not entirely sure how big the woods were either, there was a lot of empty farmland around. We solid snake around and frick around in various bodies of water until we hear barking. Eventually we decide to turn around and find our way back, begin to notice that the barking is coming from the assumed direction of our neighborhood and our local dogs. Get closer and closer to the barking, until I see a group of 6 to 8 men wearing purple robes. My young mind had no idea what to think, thought they were the KKK. Me and black friend hide near a small cluster of bushes and observe them, probably about 150 yards away with a small pond in between us. They're just standing there, hardly moving, sort of slowly swaying, and their dogs are going absolutely nuts. Wait around for what seems to be an entirety in my mind, we finally agree to book it and get away. Almost the moment we left the bushes, I see movement in my peripheral. When I look at them, they turn straight towards us. Still standing still, facing us. I nearly stop when I see their faces. Extremely pale, and I could not make out any color in their eyes looked white. Dogs now jumping on their leashes towards us. Luckily they're still standing there, not giving any crap. I take one last glance before they're out of my sight and notice pile of what I assume is gore in the center of them. B20. Decides to write a VN. Needs a few pictures. Go in the forest to take some. At night, of course, but with the flash, the pictures are decent enough. Decides to go near an abandoned house because I feel lucky. Have a light but don't use it because I can see in the dark and it's creepier with it. Reach the main gate. Takes a few pictures of it with the flash. Hear loud things over my head. PPP, probably an owl, I think. Decides not to try my luck. Is suddenly much more aware of the noise in the forest. Whole thing was pretty silent until now. Ends up running out of the woods. Never managed to write that damn thing. Took pictures for nothing. Hardly in a woods, but I want more stories, so here goes. A solid line of forest behind duplex, not sure how far it spans, but it's about the length of a football field from my backyard to the end. Incredibly steep, like to the point where you have to grab trees and pull yourself up to traverse it. The one time me and some friends went exploring, nothing happened, we saw it opened up to a golf course at the top. So we have this 4 feet tall Pink Panther plushie. Edgy teenagers with swords and whatnot, generally beat the crap out of it. Swords were dull, didn't actually do much. I forget why, but we take it up into the woods one day. Find what looks like somewhere a hobo lived, booze bottles, shirts, trash etc. everywhere in a ragged blanket. Messing around tossing bottles and crap, hear rustling in the distance, like at least man-sized rustling. Can't make out where it's coming from, the trees aren't even that dense. Always get kind of an ominous feeling when we go in there. We know about leaving the panther. About a week later we muster the courage to go get it, we need something to go ninja on. Find it where we left it. Its torso was torn to shreds, where the stomach was is just stuffing ripped out indiscriminately like whatever did it expected, entrails, arm missing, eyes and throat gashed out, also extremely dirty, looks like it had been exposed to the elements for a long time. Start to nope and hear the same rustling. Super nope engaged. Nearly sprint downhill, which takes a lot longer because of the incline. Get out unscathed aside from small cuts etc. running through the foliage. Feel like we're safe, kind of just staring into the trees. Here rusting very close to the tree line, which is about 50 feet from the back of the duplex. Bolt inside pooping bricks. Watch out window for an hour. Nothing. Make ramen. We never go up there again, though once fall comes we spot the arm that was missing stuck up in a tree. Probably just a bored/mad hobo, but was still too spooky for me. Not my story, but my sister's. In the woods behind our neighborhood, playing in the creek with friend. Look up and see this tall, white, featureless man. Freeze and watch it. It leans down on all fours, body moving as if it is almost liquid, like it has no bones. Shape shifts into almost like a cow. Both crap bricks and run up the hill back to our house. We always called it the cow man. Both my sister and her friend are in the mid-20s and still swear by this. Both are religious and don't lie. I've posted about this a few times but no one ever knows what it is. Foot green text. I was around 17 years old, in South Carolina, driving up from Charleston to Dorchester for a party with a friend of mine named Kyle. I was the driver, and he was the passenger. Now, I'd lived in South Carolina for 7 years, and spent another 6 in Sevierville, Tennessee prior to that, and I was in love with the wilderness. Nothing creepy had ever happened in all that time, regardless of how rural or backwoods I'd gotten. So, driving up there, the hour got late, we were on a stretch of lonely road with nothing but woods and swamp on either side of the road. No buildings, no houses, and no real civilization for around 30 miles ahead, and behind us. Conversation was typical 17-year-old dude conversation, dude, we're gonna get so wasted. I haven't seen these guys in forever, and so on, and so forth. I have my eyes on the road, however, in order to make sure I don't slam into some random wildlife crossing by, with no lights, in the woods, at 1:30 in the AM, visibility was fairly crappy. As I'm talking, I spot something around 500 feet up the road walking along the side of the pavement, towards our car. As my mind is on driving and convo, my first thought on the figure was probably some hitchhiker, or maybe someone's car broke down. However, as soon as I heard how strange both of those possibilities sounded, I started to watch the figure more closely. 1:40 in the AM, now, middle of the goddamn woods, with no civilization for dozens of miles in either direction, and the road is one way. I haven't passed a car, or seen another car, in over an hour. Conversation slows down, as the figure gets closer. I realize something isn't quite right, because it's way too tall, now that it's closer. I'm 5'10", and my friend was 6'1" and 245 pounds, but this thing? This thing had to have been 8 at least, and the body proportions were wrong. The arms dangled far below the hip, with human-esque hands with way too long fingers. I could not make out claws, but who knows, it was dark. The head was bald. The skin was pale grey-white, like a maggot, and mottled brown splotches, which may have been dirt or natural coloration, were mixed in. The eyes were black, large, and reflected light in a predatory way when the truck's lamps shone on them. The legs were bent oddly at the knees, but were quite long nonetheless. Couldn't make out the feet, but the hands were humanish, so I'd presume the feet were, too. The worst part was the mouth. Imagine a human mouth, where the lower jaw has been stretched and distended all the way down to the chest. The teeth were yellow, and sharp. The mouth was red, but had no visible tongue lolling around. Conversation stopped dead. I flicked the high beams on, as it seemed to be quickening pace as we approached, moving in a very jerky and halting manner, and when the high beams hit, it shrieked in a weird, two-toned way, and made to move across the road. Which was bad, because my reaction had been to slam on the accelerator in order to pass the thing by. We locked eyes as I approached, and I introduced that grey-skinned motherfricker to a Ford F-150 doing about 70. When we collided, everybody screamed, me, Kyle, and Stretch Armstrong, and the thing made a pleasingly solid thump upon impact with the right corner of the hood and bumper. The shrieking stopped abruptly, and turned into a squalling moan, and the impact sent it hurtling into a tree on the roadside. We kept going. There was no blood, and only minor damage to the truck. I love steel. As we passed it, I told him to check R6, and he said, "It's down. I can see its legs. It's not moving." I nodded once, and stayed quiet for another 5 minutes. My friend, who was used to being a badass and playing high school football on the D-line, was visibly shaken. He was in his seat, and he was hyperventilating. I drove the rest of the way in silence, got to the party, said hi so I could get through the door, locked myself in the bathroom, looked myself in the mirror, and probably cried for about 15 minutes. No clue what road. I live in Miami now, and I'm 27. I don't really care whether anyone believes me. I know what I saw, and I saw it way before I ever even heard 4chan existed, or knew what a skinwalker was. I was a huge nerd, very much into D&D and other crap, so part of my issue was trying to figure out what fricking monster I even saw. It didn't seem to match any description of anything I'd ever heard of. All I knew was, it wasn't human, and we gave it a black eye in exchange for a dented hood and scratched paint, so I knew it was solid and not some kind of ghost, or hallucination. I actually decided to share the story, because some of the skinwalker posts have mentioned them as being grey-skinned, naked men, which synced up exactly with what I saw. It's actually comforting to know other people have encountered them, and I hope it comforts the people who have encountered them to know that they don't seem to enjoy being broadsided by 3 tons of steel at 70 miles per hour. If it was a person, they're dead now. Sucks for them, but they deserved it for wandering around in an 8-foot-tall studio-quality costume with a built-in voice distorter at 1:40 in the AM on a deserted road. What did they think was gonna happen? Get picked up and taken to the party in exchange for a blowy joey? Too implausible. Some weird, undocumented thing hanging out and preying on people living on the fringe of society? Sounds scarier, but more reasonable. To me, the fact that this thing found our little encounter unpleasant suggests they may be a big problem for solo humans, but 10 or 20 or 30, heavily armed and armored, combat-ready and supported with vehicular backup? If a civ vehicle can put it on its ass, I bet human firepower and superior numbers could make sure it never got up again. And maybe they're not smart enough to understand our technology, but smart enough to do what most predators do, go after the stragglers, and nibble at the corners of the herd, not the herd itself. After all, stampedes can kill a lion, no prob. No idea about the body, for all I know, it may have been killed by the impact. I never looked back. All my pal said was, "It's down, and it's not moving," and that was good enough for me. It was near Holly Hill. For what it's worth, I don't believe these things are supernatural. I believe they're flesh and blood, with capabilities largely unknown because no one's ever captured one. Judging by the weird, coppery, metallic, rotten egg smell on the hood, yet, I fricking smelled it to see if there was anything to smell, and judging by the fact that both skinwalker stories and stories about skunk apes, Bigfoot, etc., are all frequently accompanied by bad smells which are generally uniform in description. I suspect they may all be the same thing, or perhaps different subspecies. Large, forest-dwelling, predatory, intelligent, good at hiding, afraid or weary of technology, and apparently capable of assuming different shapes. I rest easy in the knowledge that deforestation will root them out and reveal them, eventually. Until then, my main curiosity is over what their motivation is. Why do they copy humans, and take over their lives, like the changelings and doppelgangers in old stories? Are they equal with human intelligence, or not as bright? This is the one blatantly paranormal thing that has ever happened to me, and it's not so hard for me to fit it into my worldview. If something is not widely known to a society which thinks it knows everything already, they tend to dismiss it as fable. No way in hell would I have stopped, gotten out, and checked to see if it was dead. Think about it. If it was alive, it'd be pissed, and I'd be an unarmed 17-year-old in the dark versus something that could survive a collision with a truck. If it was seemingly dead, and I tried to load it into the truck, and it turned out it was just taking a nap, I'm fucked, once again. My life was more important to me than possible fame, and on top of that, priority number one was putting as much distance between me and that thing as possible. If you'd seen the thing's face and mouth and the sheer size and way it moved, it didn't exactly scream friendly. It screamed, but I didn't even hear friendly once. What I heard was, "I'm going to come over there and make your insides come out, where they can't do you any good." I wasn't trying to even run it over with the truck. The road was narrow, I had no room to swerve. I made to pass it by, it made to cut me off, and I guess it ended up regretting it. I don't know about that. I had a very bad unexplainable experience one night, never saw what it was. Basically, I had been smelling a dead animal around my house for a few days. I took every effort I could to find it, only to find one bone. The smell came suddenly, stayed for a few days, and left suddenly. The day before the smell was gone and I found the bone, had to have been from a moose. It was huge. I had the bad experience at night. I was in my home, in my bedroom, watching TV late at night, all alone. I smelled the dead animal smell again, but this time inside my fricking house. I grabbed my Beretta handgun, loaded it, and part of it went missing when I wasn't looking directly at it, a part that was required for function, the main recoil spring. Blew my mind, there is no way to remove this part without field stripping the pistol. I grabbed my machete and pumped myself up, and cleared my house. Smell went away, hasn't been back since. Since then I have upped my arsenal, and have cleared the woods around me, no sign of the smell or what the hell it was. I'm not sure firearms would work against it, if they even fired. Location: Northern Maine. I live in Arizona. The woods north of where I live is called Payson. When I was 9 and my uncle was 11, we went for a hike in the woods. My uncle had gotten a 9mm for his 10th birthday, sort of a family tradition. We were told not to take it with us on our hike, so of course we hid that bad boy and put a fake black BB gun in its place. My fat aunt had no idea. We wanted to go shooting, so we walked a long way into the woods, long enough so that no one would hear us. This was both good and bad, I will explain. We finally thought we were far enough away so that no one would hear us, but then we saw the cabin. It was really weird to see a cabin this far out, and I had a real creepy feeling about the whole thing. My uncle was a very brave guy and also very caring and protective of me. Pretty much all you could ask for in an uncle. He decided to make sure no one was there, and then we could shoot some cans and crap. I stayed outside and waited for him. About 7 minutes later I heard a loud smash and sounds of a fight taking place. I ran toward the house, but I cannot explain the fear I felt. I had an abusive stepdad and it made me very timid. When I got to the back door I could see into what was the kitchen. I saw my uncle laying on the floor and bleeding from his head. A homeless man, by the look of him, was holding him by his penis and balls and was squeezing them, asking if he was alone. My uncle yelled over and over that he was all alone. The man started kissing him and flipped his body over. In that moment my uncle noticed my crying face in the doorway and mouthed the word "run." He did not look afraid, he looked strong, caring. I understood he was saving my life and it broke my heart. 8 crawled back to our backpacks and remembered the gun. I took the gun shaking out of the holster. My grandpa had showed me how to use it. I went through the front of the house trying to be quiet. I could hear the sounds my uncle and the man were making, and they were awful. I pointed the gun at the back of the man and shot twice. I was expecting the sound but not the smell. All at once I could smell the most awful thing I had ever smelled before. It was blood and sweat and fear. I get sick just thinking about it. The man was trying to duct tape my uncle's hands and was about halfway done. The man fell forward, blood coming out of him faster than I thought possible. My uncle looked at me from over his shoulder and gave me a wide smile. His eyes stayed on me as he got up, pulled up his pants and took the gun from my hand. He said I did a good thing and that I had saved him. The man was making an awful sound and sorta snake crawling on the floor. My uncle shot him in the back of the head and he stopped. The walk back was very hard for my uncle and I could see he was in a lot of pain. He had blood running down his leg and I hate to think where it was coming from. We told my grandfather the whole story and he drove my uncle to the hospital. He had to get 11 stitches in his anus and the recovery was awful. The police did not find the cabin or the man. They looked for like 2 weeks, even used a helicopter. They took our statement and that was it. People said I saved my uncle's life, but it was his courage and my grandfather training us that got us out alive. I miss my grandpa Ralph. As for my uncle, he is doing fine. He is a police officer and works with rape survivors. I love you, Chris. You are my hero. I posted a story about a year ago about how my friends and I find a weird man-made structure in the woods. I doubt if anyone remembers. But some crap happened recently and on Sunday I had a pretty messed up experience, so I'll give you the full story and what's transpired since. There's a small university in my town. About a mile behind the dorms there's a lake, and behind that some woods. Students are always going to the lake, grilling, drinking, smoking pot, the usual college kid stuff. The campus security doesn't bother with it since it's so minor and it's not on campus proper anyway. I don't go there myself, but I have friends who do. One day he and a bunch of people go and have a campfire. Everyone there gets ridiculously drunk, including my friend. He decides it's a good idea to go in a woods and find a place to take a crap. It was still light out, so he wasn't scared. He drunkenly stumbles into the woods, going about half a mile in. That's when he came across some sort of man-made structure, almost a mini fort or a wigwam. It certainly stood out. He thinks it's weird and heads back to the fire. A few days later he told me about it. Naturally, I was curious and I asked him to show it to me. He ended up taking me out there. I found the whole thing fascinating. This fort was made very meticulously and carefully, the sticks being about the same length. Why would someone build this? How long did this take? And how did someone do it without being noticed? We have our look around and go. But I couldn't help but go back. I find the whole thing fascinating. I went back a few times. Things took a turn for the weird one of the times I came back. An animal skull, placed at eye level, stared back at me. Understandably, I was kinda freaked out. I left. I didn't go back into the woods after that. But I did drive by, park my car, and listen. I heard things, like the faint sound of drums. I didn't go back into the woods, until last Sunday. Months passed, and eventually my curiosity won out. It was just too weird. The fort, the skulls, the eerie noises coming from the woods. I had to know what the hell was happening in those woods. The school year was ending soon, so I decided that my chances were slipping. Sunday seemed ideal. I dressed in dark blue, better than black at night. The human eye can detect the outline of black, filled my pack with water, an energy bar or two, my camera, a flashlight, and my knife. I didn't ask any of my friends to go with me. I'd asked them before and they refused each time. I also didn't want them coming out and pranking me for shits and giggles. I took my bike and rode it to campus and parked it and walked the mile to the woods. It was around 8 and the last vestiges of light were disappearing. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced darkness before, but this was real darkness. The lights of campus were a mile away and the woods were thick. Without my flashlight I was completely blind. To make matters worse, the forest was filled with fallen trees. We've had several nasty storms and even a tornado out that way, so entire trees had fallen down. I had to be careful not to fall and break my neck. It took me 20 minutes, but I eventually find the wigwam. I had noted this previously, and observed it once again, but curiously there were no cigarette butts, alcohol bottles, soda cans, or condom wrappers like you would find if students were coming out there. The dirt had markings in it, but they were scratched over, like someone kicked dirt over them to hide them. I walked about 20 yards past the fort, hunkered down, and waited. Hours passed and nothing happened. I sat there, swatting bugs, fighting boredom, and asking myself what the hell I was doing, over and over again. 5 hours passed in this way. Around 1 things changed. The sounds of the forest in front of me quieted. I saw lights in front of me, flashlights, 3 of them. I immediately got on my stomach. As they got closer I could hear voices, 2 guys and 1 girl. I watched as they made their way to the wigwam. They were talking but I couldn't hear what they were saying. They got under the fort and started busying themselves with something. Moments later I saw a fire spring up. I didn't know any of these people, although they looked to be around my age, early 20s. One of the guys was carrying a bag, and they kept getting crap out of it. When they pulled animal bones out, a chill ran up my spine. Things went downhill from there. The guys arranged the bones while the girl scratched something into the dirt. Their voices were still low, but it sounded like they were chanting in tandem. I don't believe in energy and auras and all that, but at that moment it felt like the entire forest was a giant cold spot. Their voices rose, their chanting continued, and I shat a brick. Then the fire went out. They didn't kick it out or pour water on it. This was instantaneous, like someone snuffing out a candle. The temperature seemed to drop even more. I started shivering and couldn't stop. It felt like my goddamn bones were freezing. I covered my mouth with my hand because I was afraid they would hear my teeth chattering. The last thing I wanted was for these people to know someone was watching them. I listened, and in the pitch blackness I could hear the girl talking. It didn't seem like she was talking to one of the guys, but someone new, as if a new person had just dropped out of the sky. That's when I heard the sound that I will never forget, the sound that's already wormed its way into my nightmares. It was like someone was trying to breathe, but their throat was damaged or slit. It was ragged, loud, and to my ears, inhuman. A sound that echoed through the forest and nearly made me piss myself. If I was scared before, I was nearly catatonic with terror at this point. Never before had I heard such a horrifying noise. At that point my brain and body were screaming at me, "Flight, flight, flight," and I thought it best to comply. Slowly, I turned myself, got into crouching position, and walked as carefully as I could. It was pitch black in this woods, and in my mind if I couldn't see them, they couldn't see me. The chanting had started again, and to my horror those gasping, dying breaths punctuated those chants. I got about 10 yards when I had my cliché moment. I snapped a twig under my foot. Immediately the chants stopped. The breathing noises stopped. I could hear one of the guys say, "What the hell?" Then the breathing, the gasping, the awful cries started. And then, even worse, they got louder. They were moving toward me. It was at this point I went into maximum nope mode. I couldn't run, because I couldn't go 5 feet or so without tripping over a tree or a root. I got out of crouching position and fast walked as fast as my body allowed, feeling ahead of my like a blind guy. I don't think you can imagine how terrifying it is to not be able to run away from something when every fiber of your being tells you to do just that. I kept going. Duck or crawling under fallen trees, as fast as I possibly could. To me, it sounded like the breathing was gaining, but in my terrified state I couldn't be sure. It was at this point the cultish trio finally came to their sense. I looked back and could see them switch on flashlights. My first thought was, that's it for me. I did the only thing I could. The next fallen tree I came, I wedged myself under it, threw some fallen leaves on me, and wedged myself as far into the dirt as I possibly could. I don't think the trio knew which general direction I had gone, because they never really came close to where I was laying. But the breathing persisted. That disgusting, guttural head seemed to be all around me. I felt like vomiting and crying. Once again, I had to hold my hand over my mouth so I wouldn't give away my location. I thought for sure whatever the hell that horrible voice belonged to would eventually find me. Again, hours passed. The breathing persisted. I wanted to see if the flashlights were near me, but I was too scared to sit up. Eventually, the breathing stopped. I had a crash, that is to say I had so much adrenaline pumping through my body moments before that I was exhausted. I surprised myself by going to sleep. When I woke up the sun was shining through the trees. I'm not exaggerating when I say, I was never so fucking happy to see the sun again. Carefully, I sat up and looked around. No people, no breathing, no nothing. Everything seemed normal. Part of me wanted to go back to the wigwam to investigate, but the logical part of me screamed at me to get the hell out of there. After all, there was the possibility they were watching it. I thought it a bad idea to come out the same way the trio and I came from, the south. Instead I went east and hugged the tree line that borders the lake. I ended up walking around the entire lake. It took me an extra hour, but I felt safe. I even saw a young doe, which for some reason put me at ease. Got around the lake. Walked back to campus, unlocked my bike, and got the hell out of there. I haven't been near the woods since and I don't plan on ever going near them anytime soon. Apologies if my story was long-winded. I'm drunk and tired. Also, I apologize for not having pictures of the actual fort/wigwam. I must have erased them. A bit of background: my father was born in Washington state and moved around a lot, settled in Colorado for like 20 years before starting a family out in California, so we'd go to Washington and Colorado every summer for a few weeks at a time as a family, and drive from one corner to another, and see all sorts of stuff. The vibes I always got hiking/camping/exploring Washington was wonder and safety. The Hoh National Rainforest was magical to a 10-year-old kid. I thought I could live there forever. And then we started going to Colorado when I was in middle school, and that crap was a whole other ballgame. The woods are dense, clustered, claustrophobic, dark, and terrifying. I always felt uncomfortable and watched whenever we set off into the wilds, regardless of what portion of Colorado we were in at the time. I'll green text for the sake of easy reading for the actual stories. Driving through central part of Colorado, spent a decent amount of time around Winter Park, where my dad lived mostly, and the woods surrounding that area. Out on some back roads, Mom and sister passed out, Dad telling me stories and pointing out things. We emerge from some heavily wooded roads and end up in unkempt farmland, grass as tall as I was at the time. All sorts of buildings. Suddenly, we see a barn and several cabins smoldering. Dad pulls over, being the strong, admirable man he is. He tramps into the grass with his Bowie knife to make sure nothing's wrong. Comes back 5 minutes later white as a sheet, holding his knife so hard his knuckles were white. Says not one word, puts the car in drive and slams down on the pedals so hard gravel and dirt spray up everywhere. I ask him repeatedly what's wrong. He says nothing, puts his hand on my shoulder and gives it a big squeeze. He won't answer me when I ask 10 years later, now. Few others to follow. Hiking in woods towards the northern border of Colorado with just my dad, sister and mom had no interest. Thick woods, a little uneasy, but my grizzled old dad is with me clearing a trail so I figure nothing could happen. Trees start pressing in closer and closer, dense undergrowth, tripping and stumbling as my dad trucks on through. Suddenly we break through the veritable wall of greenery into this flattened circular clearing. Nothing in it, it's a decently sized patch of grass. Nothing growing inside the ring besides the short grass. Decent day in terms of weather, but there's mist at about waist height, to me. Dad takes one step into the circle. Removes his foot like he'd just been shocked. Looks at me. This is a man that fought in Vietnam and who knows what else that he hasn't told me about. This man looked terrified. He barrels back the way we came, hefts me up on his shoulder and we never look back. Refuses to tell me what he felt/might have seen. Have a few others. Driving with my family, Mom wanted to stop off at a town called Bonanza. Why not? Never saw the show, wouldn't hurt. Get to Bonanza, I expected a decently sized town, nothing too big or fancy. It's literally a square patch of grass the size of a medium house's first story with 3 buildings on 3 sides of the square. Maybe 5 or 6 big trucks on the square grass area. We see no one walking around, no sign of anyone being anywhere in the houses, but doors are open and windows are unshuttered/open as well. Dad muses about it being a hunter's retreat where people go to drink, hunt and hang out for vacations. We pull up and get out, parents and sister go one way, I go towards a billboard-like display a bit further away. It's right by a tiny brook bubbling up from the ground. Start reading while parents explore, start to get closer to the cars, grass, and houses. Turns out this was a mining town with mining shafts all around the area and behind the houses. Something happened. Toxins and radioactive materials seeped into the ground and waterable. People got sick/died and eventually abandoned the town. As soon as I read about the irradiated water, the hair on my arms and neck stands straight up. Look at family, they've just gotten onto the green area. I don't know why, but I engage into panic/familial protection mode, sprint right up to them but stop short of touching the grass. Start waving them back towards me, yelling about radiation and dead people and really scaring my sister and freaking myself out more and more. Dad looks at me, think he's going to say cut that crap out, but nods his head and herds us back to the car. Won't stop panicking until everyone's safely in and buckled up. Dad starts to pull away, I look back and see the curtains move in the attic window of one of the largest houses there. See a hand poke through the curtains and beckon to me. We have never spoken about it since. I spend a lot of time outdoors, and I've only had one truly creepy experience. My friend and myself do a ton of hiking, hunting, fishing, general outdoors stuff. His older brother has a small cabin in upstate New York just outside of Rome, which is surrounded by state game lands. We go up there all the time. Pack up the truck, hitch the trailer with the quads, and go. This happened while we were up there. I'm 22 at the time and my friend is 25. Making a trip up to the cabin in late September to start scouting some game trails and set up stands for the season. Also just to get away and piss off. Pack the truck with food, clothes, ammo, and our guns. Hitch the trailer with a generator and 2 quads. Finally get there after a 6-hour ride. It's about 8 p.m., so it's getting dark out fast, so we get a fire, going crack some beer, and get to unpacking. Cabin is located in the only clearing on the property. Clearing is about 100 yards by 80 yards. While we're unpacking we notice crap is super quiet, which isn't necessarily cause for alarm, it's just strange that it's so quiet it causes me to take notice. Finish unpacking around 10 p.m. and hit the sack around 11 p.m. Now, when I say a small cabin I mean it's a small cabin. About 350 sf total with a loft at both ends and the rafters where the bunks are located. Mine is located directly over the only door to the cabin. I wake up around 4 a.m. and hear something moving around outside. I just lay there and listen for a while, figuring it's either a coon or possum looking for some scraps. But it clearly sounds like it's walking on 2 legs. Typically raccoons make more of a shuffling/rummaging sound. Say screw it and go back to sleep. Wake up the next morning. Don't even recall waking up. Go outside and get a fire going for breakfast. Shit just ain't right. Certain things are moved. Definitely not in the same place we left them last night. Memory is jogged and I remember waking up last night. Ask my friend did he heard anything. Says he remembers waking up, but doesn't recall hearing anything. He asks me why I moved all the crap around this morning. Tell him I didn't and about how I heard something moving around outside last night. He says if it wasn't a coon it was probably a coyote or a bear. This makes sense. Decide to go for a hike to start scouting some trails. We grab our packs and head out. Walk for a few miles. When we come to this lake we always go to as a starting point. All game trails go to this lake, it's the main source of water for the deer and such. Hanging around the lake shore looking for sign. Look across the lake, which is about 250-300. The bushes are moving. We both see it but can't really see what's causing it. Decide to not mess with it and continue around the lake. Spend the rest of the day scouting and shite. Head back to the cabin around 4 p.m. Get back to clearing. More crap is moved. WTF. Seems like someone is trying to mess with us. Cooler was on one side of the door when we left, now it's on the other side of the door. Generator was positioned exhaust facing away from cabin, now it's turned around. My friend and I are getting freaked out. Both decide that there's no way this isn't some sort of person trying to screw with us. Immediately arm ourselves when we get back to the cabin. He's carrying his Glock 20 and I'm carrying my Steyr M40. Keep 12 GA in the cabin. Night rolls in and we get a fire going. Around 9:30 p.m. we start hearing rustling just outside the firelight. Sounds like people running back and forth. There's at least 2 of them. Here running to the north. Stops. Here running to the south. Stops. Friend and I instantly grab our guns and our flashlights and start scanning the tree line. Both at condition 0. Running has stopped, but we can't see anything in the woods. Friend screams, if anyone's out there trying to mess around you're about to get goddamn shot. Something starts running on the backside of the cabin. Neither of us can see due to the cabin being in the way. Decide to screw this. Get back to back and make our way into the cabin. Once we get into the cabin my friend grabs the 12 GA. I lock the door and we both get into the center of the cabin. Whatever these things were, they start running around outside the cabin. Sometimes they're real close and sound like they're just outside the wall, other times they sounds like they're further out just running around. Occasionally one will creep up and slam the wall or door. This goes on for about 2 hours. During this time my friend and I are communicating using a pen and paper. Our nerves are so frayed by the point we say screw it. I grab the spotlight his brother kept in the cabin and my pistol, he shoulders the shotgun. We slam the door open expecting to shoot at the first sign of movement, but instead all we see is our fire. Whatever was out there made a huge goddamn bonfire in our fire pit while they were running around. We go back to back and make our way to the truck. Friend grabs the spotlight to keep watch, I check in and under the truck to make sure nothing's there. Everything's clear so I disconnect the trailer and we just get in and take off. Drive about 2 hours into town and sleep in the truck. Come back in the morning and everything is as it was left. Nothing in the cabin is destroyed, none of our clothes or anything are missing. The only thing different was at the back of the cabin there were rocks laid out so they made a pentagram. Immediately pack up our crap, lock up the cabin and get the hell out of there. Tell his older brother about it when we get back. He says, when I first stayed up there I had something similar happen. Except I'm fairly sure I shot one of them with the SKS I had with me. Said he went into town and stopped at a bar on his way out. Got to talking with one of the locals about it. Said the local said crap like that isn't unheard of out there. We've been back since and haven't had any problems, but that was by far the weirdest and scariest thing I've ever had happen to me. Party with 3 friends in rented cabin. Let's call them Frank, Brian and Melissa. Brian goes outside to the outhouse because there is no electricity and no real toilet in the cabin. Sit in kitchen with 2 friends hearing the door opening and someone coming in. Yell, "Hi Brian." Get no answer. Suddenly see Brian exit outhouse through window. Brian comes back in and asks WTF we're all screaming about. Never found out what it was. Also. Same friends. Brian's home watching movie. Watch comedy. Brian stands up. Melissa screams. Brian screams and falls over table hurting himself a bit. Claims I pushed him. Frank confirms I did nothing. See two red prints as if someone punched Brian on Brian's back. Melissa claims to have seen a face. Never go to Brian's again and instead watch movies at Frank's. Seems like every time I go into the woods alone I get scared whether day or night. Especially large woods. I just get this feeling that I am not in control of the situation. It's just that eerie feeling. It's not terrifying but it starts to grow the more your mind wanders off into the unknown. I used to go to the woods creek sometimes alone to smoke weed. It would happen but would go away. Hell, I practically lived in the creek woods as a kid, BMXing, making forts, smoking bud. One of the last times I went to a park was after a long night of drinking at Buddy's apartment. Everyone had gone to sleep so I decided to head to park alone to finish what was left in my bottle. As soon as I started walking into the darkness I got that feeling immediately. I reassured myself that I could ward off most anything except for another human or law enforcement. I arrived at a bridge by a playground, drank what was left, then threw the bottle. As I was walking back the feeling came back, but this time it felt more like something was watching me from the tree line. I looked over and could hear rustling. In my mind I thought it's an animal just checking me out and was afraid. Sure enough I heard it all the way out of the park and it would switch tree lines. Just sounded like something was moving out there. Pretty scary. I did not run, just walked and stood tall. I figured I am in a city at a public park. This is BS, don't panic, or be a faggot. Anyway, that is about it. Just got in my car and left. I got a story. Been meaning to post this one for a while. This is back around 2006, early summer. I was just your typical 17-year-old kid. Parents moved around a lot back in those days, but we always ended up living beside large forests, woods, or prairie places. Done plenty of exploring, with and without friends. Ton of stories, but there's always one which makes you look back on with no definite answer in sight, no matter which way you look at it. But this is how it went down. Played a lot of video, and watched a lot of TV. Taps was big in these days. People respected them then, so you can see I was really taken by the whole let's go ghost hunting trend. One of my picks. Continue. Near my house there's this big urban forest, kind of like New York Park, split into 3 parts, Forest 1, 2, 3. Through the years, I had a couple strange unexplained events happen to me in them. Phantom smells, lavender, roses, simply faded away as quick as they came. At night, in Forest 2, which had a concrete foundation where probably a house once stood, me and a few friends would see brief bright flashes of light just erupt over our heads with nothing ever there for miles, too close down for planes. It actually lit up the ground around us like if it were a hovering camera flash. Of course, now that I look back on it, it might have been a hunter's camera gadget strapped to a tree or something, one's guess. More pics. Then there was Forest 3, which had a cemetery in it. Caught a ton of EVPs there, chilling ones. Most notable one, I asked, is there a heaven, a hell, why don't you call for God? And a young woman replied to me in a sad tone. There is no God. So there was some freaky stuff going on there. One day I woke up early in the morning, 4:30 a.m. between 5 I recently bought this cheap $70 digital camera from Walmart and was extremely bored with it. So I figured an early walk in the forest should provide me with some unique pictures, which they did if you want to see them. Probably not. But they're all from this day. And we'll post some. So I set out doing the same thing I've done probably 100 tons by now. I'm jaywalking down the streets and after a couple blocks hit the forest entrance, and dive in, and I dive in deep into her. I spend the next 15 minutes just heading to some known places I know would give me some good snapshots, so I take a quickie snap here. And another quickie snap here, thinking to myself, this is gold, son. All the while forgetting, the whole entire wood is empty, silent, desolate as I had ever seen it before. I usually run into 1 or 2 people by now, either jogging or walking their mutts, but nothing. It's a good day, I say to myself, let's carry on. So I head to this area called the safe zone. It's simply called that on account that it's wide, expansive with a little sand dune and a tall tree smack down in the middle of it, so if you're under that tree, you can pretty much see all paths that string together Forest 1. I'm there, so I decide, let's bam it to the lake. I pick a path from the safe zone and head for it. It is at this time I sense an eerie feeling in the air, like I'm being watched. I ignored it, because at that age I wasn't mature enough to that point where everyone learns to trust your gut feelings, internal ringing alarm bell, whatever. Stayed calm and carried. I hit the lake. I'm tired from walking like 45 minutes of miles. Sun was out but casting grey skies with a sudden in and out drizzle between instances. I perk myself against the ledge underneath the cover of some trees and with a low battery on my camera, just decide to hang out, while staring blandly out at this lake that, be my recollection, wasn't swamped by a heavy fog or mist not 5 minutes ago. First time I seen the place like this, I tell myself. Then my eyes caught it from the distance. I'm frozen. I see a person draped in this loose sheet, what looked to be a black tarp, just simply spinning. Spinning, and spinning around in circles in a pond bush of dogtails. His or her arms open widely as if praising something repeatedly. I'm simply there being as quiet as I can be, not moving an inch, barely releasing a breath observing this mad person. This goes on for about 25 seconds until the spin comes to an abrupt stop. I stare wide-eyed with thoughts racing in my head. What's going on? What the fuck is this? Should I? I'm thinking to myself, you got a camera. Don't be one of those idiots who don't capture the crap they so desperately brag about years from now on. Low battery, bars practically invisible. Cheap ass Walmart brand. Don't die on me. I reach for it and look up. And find him looking in my direction. I tell you, I saw no face. It was white, grey, whatever, like a doll. Was it a mask? I dunno, but I was terrified that I was discovered, pinpointed out from my cover. It was far from me but it still managed to see me in like 4 seconds. So I stare slack-jaw, slowly lifting up my camera. In that moment he or it lifts one white arm out of its tarp and points at him. Just pointing at me from a distance, as if doing some ritual jest, then his arm drops slowly down. You know that scene from Shaun of the Dead where Shaun pushes the zombie chick onto the steel pole and she gets up, while Ed rotates the film reel on his camera? That's what I did. I lifted my camera up. Snap, another one. Snap. Battery officially dead. Then I got up, slowly backed away and ran all the way back to the safe zone, and out a dozen trails and paths, crisscrossing to my exit. That was a crazy ass day, I must say. 2 revealment pics coming up. Alright, I'll bite. Be 9 years old. Hanging out at old friend's house in Princeton, New Jersey. Home was near an old mental asylum village, sort of like a small time for crazy people. Village closed down long ago. Go in woods behind his house, which is kind of near the old spot. Start going out really far. See man crouched behind log 50 yards away wearing a tall hat staring at us. Nope, the frick out. Go back to the closer area, his house is only 25 yards away. See a cloaked gray human figure dancing strangely between a few trees. Nope, round 2. Get to porch in his backyard overlooking the woods. See a new figure, all white, walking across a path 100 yards away in the woods. Never leave his house for the rest of the weekend. I will never, ever forget that day. The dancing figure haunts me to this day. B12. Get sent to a correctional summer camp by mistake because best friend's mom is ESL. 1,200 kids. I'm one of 5 white kids. Friend and I get assigned to Cherokee Camp. Cherokee Camp is pretty in a woods and my cabin is even further in a woods about 25 m from a large creek. Cabins are your basic 15x156 foot wall with 4 feet of openness into the roof. Bunk beds. Bottom bunk is mashed up against the wall, top bunk is exactly parallel with the open window. Get a top bunk assigned. Camp generally pretty cool. I was/am a bit weird, so the blacks thought I was a voodoo doctor. Late one night laying in bunk. New moon. Night is blacker than the camp. Hear what I thought was raccoons fighting by creek. The fight manages to make its way right under my window. Screams and snarls rattle my existence. One creature slams into the side of the cabin and runs off howling. Hear growling and labored breathing. Then hear claws scratching and pulling through the window. Hide in sleeping bag. Creature climbs into bunk and sits on my legs. Can't breathe, I'm so terrified. Entire camp is dead quiet, why won't anyone help me? Creature is impossibly heavy, couldn't move if I wanted to. It sits and licks itself for what feels like forever. Suddenly hear a truck tear into camp. Bright spotlights blaze into my cabin. Creature lets out some horrible scream like something I've never heard before. It bolts out the window, so hard and fast it rips my sleeping bag and scratches my left shin. Piss myself. Truck tears off into the woods after it. Next morning find hollowed out raccoon by the creek. All other campers visibly frightened the next morning. They all thought I was dead. We all asked counselors WTF happened. Never get a straight answer. 32 now, still have a scar on my shin from whatever scratched me. This was way in Northern California. Hey, race the scar. It's hard to see now as it's 20 years old. It was the chief counselor's truck. He had some crazy stories about that camp. He had worked there for over 30 years. It had roof lights and 2 huge spotlight cannons for when kids would try to escape. Hey, race one, which included people that I found. After walking along a beach in Olympia, I headed into the woods to explore. About 3:30 p.m., I found this very odd camp with 2 people. I think they were a couple. The guy looked like he was about 50, the girl was like 30 probably. They looked like castaways because their clothes were just totally messed up and they were all dirty. I said what's up and they started talking to me, mostly ranting on these strange tangents about the forest. Anyway, their camp was basically blankets all over and cans and blankets stretched across trees for cover. Obviously it rains a lot. They had liberty caps, magic shrooms, laid out drying on one side of the camp. There was probably like 2 pounds. One thing that was really weird was these like handmade clay urns laying in a row on a blanket. There was like 15 or so, and when I asked, the guy got really pissed and started telling me that if I start messing with people's stuff I should expect trouble. And the girl like curled into a ball for a bit, way goddamn weird. I said sorry and whatever, and then the girl asked me if I wanted some beer. I was pretty interested, so I decided to stay. While we were drinking though, they didn't talk or respond to any questions. Then I looked at the urns and the guy just yelled really loud at me and then took the girl to the side and whispered to her. Anyway, they came back and started drinking again, probably about 6:30 p.m. by now, but now they kept glancing at me with really pissed off looks every so often and still ignored me. I was getting pretty freaked out, plus it was getting hella late, so I was like, yo, so I'm leaving. I acted a bit more aggressive because I was freaked, and I also had my hand on my knife in my pocket. They still just freaking stared at me. So I left kind of normally, but once I got further away I booked it. So that was pretty tripped out, but when I thought I was seriously going to die is when I got back by the camp area, and the ranger post. It was pretty far, like an hour walk, and it was fairly dark and no one was there. As I'm passing the post, all of a sudden I hear this guy goddamn yell again all freaking crazy, and I look over and he's just standing over at the edge of the woods, breathing all hard and staring at me. I flipped and started yelling, and I pulled out my knife, telling him to fuck off. Then he yelled at me, "You are such a stupid fuck. You fuck. You fuck." And then he pulled out a fricking gun from his pocket. It was like a tiny revolver or some crap. At that point I just flipped crap, telling him to calm down and shit, and then he just laughed, mostly just snorted, and put it away and left. Scariest goddamn thing ever. I felt like crying the whole way home. Anyway, sorry this story's all over the place and ended with kind of nothing, but it was seriously so messed up. Most of them, chief counselor stories, were your basic scare the kids camp stories. But he told this one that made his face pale, so I think there was some legitimacy to it. So the camp had a corral for the horses that was right by the main road. It was the first structure after a bridge that lead off into the woods, a 30-minute drive to the highway. I'm sorry I don't remember all the details, this was a long time ago. But 2 kids tried to escape one night. The guards were on them in about 10 minutes. They were spotted running across the bridge. They got to the far side, which was sort of cliff-like, fairly steep into about a 20-foot drop. One guard was on the opposite bank with a spotlight on them and the other was running across the bridge. One kid froze on the bridge after the guard shouted to him, while the other kept running. He had just gotten to the other side when something darted across the bridge, knocking over the guard and the now captured kid. The guard with the light ran over to them. No one knew what the hell was happening, they just reported a larger-than-human figure pushing them over. The kid who fled was found on the shore of the creek unconscious, with no memory of even trying to escape or trying to escape with his friend. I have another story in continuation to this. So later that summer, animals start to go missing. The camp had about 12 horses and a petting zoo with pigs and goats, stuff like that. At first a few chickens would go missing here and there. Then a goat, then 2 pigs. This was over a 3-week period. The head counselor set up a blind to try and catch what was doing this. So one night he's in his blind by the petting zoo. In this part of the camp it's shapes like an L. The bottom right is the zoo/blind, the 90-degree is the corral, which is 20 m from the zoo. And the vertical is the road and bridge into the woods and out of camp. So at about 2 a.m. he starts hearing sniffing and grunting almost like wild pigs between the zoo and corral. Not wanting to blow his cover, the chief doesn't shine his light, hoping the creature will come closer. It doesn't, it goes to the corral and attacks a horse. The chief counselor said by the time he got to the corral, whatever this thing was had killed their newest horse, dragged it 60 meters across the bridge, removing its head and vanishing into the woods. He caught a few glimpses of the thing and said it had to be around 8 feet tall and mannish shaped. The horse's head was found at the property's owner's house in the front yard 5 miles away the next morning. Told you I would. Something else happened while I was there with my friend. I had completely forgotten. I called him earlier today to catch up and see if he remembered anything else. So the swimming pool was actually a dammed part in the creek. It had a rocky beach on one side and a steep hill with a 15-foot rocky outcropping, diving board, on the other. On average the water was probably 5 feet deep and maybe 7 to 8 underneath the outcropping. So on the hottest day of camp the swimming hole was packed, maybe 20 kids. Doesn't sound like a lot, but the swimming area was relatively small, 12 feet across by maybe 30 in length. Almost everyone is lining up to jump off the rock. And my buddy is just sitting in the shallow water playing with rocks and river clay. So the lunch siren blows, and everyone lines up to be counted. You had to be counted in and out for each activity area. Well, the count comes up one short. They count again, still short. The lifeguards question everyone there. A few kids that were on the beach said the missing girl jumped right at the siren. Both lifeguards jump in and dive search for the girl. The water was pretty murky and muddy, it had no visibility. They do this for so long, my friend and that group miss lunch entirely. More counselors show up. 8 people are in this small pool searching for this girl. Still nothing. The search continues for another 5 hours. At this point no one but staff is allowed at the swimming hole. So the next day they bring in a backhoe, bulldozer combination, and a water pump. Because it's a creek they can only drain so much, but they still manage to get the deep water down to about 4 feet. So they finally find the girl about 26 hours after she had gone missing. She was at the bottom of the deep part, and I think it's important to mention that there were no logs or ledges under the water that might snag up a body. I found out later by accidental eavesdropping that the girl was completely covered in rocks. The only way they found her was someone stepped down on some rocks that didn't move like they normally would against other rocks. So screw that camp. I have no explanation for any of it. I have no idea what sat on me, and scratched my leg. No idea what could drag a full-grown horse, and no idea what could bury a girl under 9 feet of water with rocks with all those people around. B-17. California, near redwood forests, tons of old mines and awesome stuff in there. Lots of Marine friends, but I'm a total civilian so they kind of tolerate my lack of manliness. Girlfriend is a Marine, could probably kill me with a napkin. Girlfriend, friend Bob, friend Jack, and friend Annie decide that we're gonna go camping in a woods. I've been on /x/ plenty of times, lol, nope, that idea away. Girlfriend promises to lend me a gun, she's got a Schmidt M1882 she never uses. I have a huge revolver boner and I am a decent shot. Naturally, since I'm not a fricking pussy, I agree. No way was I going into the woods without a gun though. We drive 30 minutes into the woods, park, start roughing it. Carrying smaller pack than ultra-hardcore Marine friends, but I'm not in bad shape so I keep up. Eventually we came across an abandoned mine entrance. It was starting to get dark and I was leery of being in a woods as it was, so we decided to set up camp just inside the mine entrance. Camp consists of 3 tents, me and girlfriend, one for Bob and Jack, one for Annie, with a small generator for a cupola floodlights. Set up tents by cliff face, triangle formation with mine closest the wall and the other 2 in front of it. Sitting in the middle with a fire, the floods pointed out at the forest because we ain't morons. Beans, they're good for your heart. Laughing at Bob's crafty duck call when suddenly forest goes dead silent. I automatically bring it to the others' attentions. Marine mode activated. JPG. I have a death grip on girlfriend's M1882. They put me in the middle because civilian priorities, goddamn bullshit. Rustling in the tree line, heart is breaking through my sternum. Goddamn coyote! Are you fucking kidding me? The others are nearly pissing themselves laughing. Bob has some standard issue sort of handgun and he takes a pot shot at the coyote which scatters. I'm irritated. Girlfriend is trying to cuddle or some crap to make me feel better, but it's still dead quiet, so I'm having none of it. Branch snaps in a woods. Now my friends may have been huge cocksmears and goofballs, but they knew their crap and they clammed up. Loud rustling. The hell even is that? Is it a bear? M1882 trained on trilene, but nothing in the floodlights. Nasty, nasty feeling, same feeling you get when you touch something gross. What the hell is going on? Choking noises from the tree line. Jack dumps the boiling water we used to heat the cans of beans up on the fire. Skin feels like it is literally crawling. Like I said, I've been hunting before and I'm not exactly faint of heart, but I swear to God I was shaking like a goddamn leaf. Bob actually had to tell me to cut it out because the bullets were rattling in my revolver. Annie is shaking lightly too. Jack is sweating like a fakin' pig. Choking noises intensify, get louder. Suddenly realize there's something approaching the campsite from one of the dark areas just outside the floodlight range. I'm not going to green text my description of this because I want to be precise. This thing was about 7 feet tall. It was only catching reflected light off the floods, so I don't remember it Ultra HD clearly per SE, but I do have a vivid recollection of it. It had long arms. It might have been walking on its knuckles, or it was swinging them back and forth. It had a longish head, and its skin was sort of a dull greenish-brownish color on its back. It looked like there was either moss or really tight curly hair growing on its shoulders, but from its collarbone up its skin was milky pale. It was mostly human-looking, but it had no lips, just skin pulled tight over these big, wide teeth, and its nose was gone. Its eyes were narrowed to slits, like it'd been staring at the floods for an hour or something. Can't contain it, let out a little whimper. Thing's head snaps to me like lightning. I take a shot at it, goes wide, everyone pivots and starts shouting. Thing starts opening its mouth. Slowly and surreally, like it was yawning. Lets out the most hideous, ear-splitting noise I have ever heard in my life. Like an elk call, but pitched down and overlaid with the sound of a little girl screaming. Open fire! I can't handle the feeling on my skin, I drop like a rock. Noises coming to me like through deep water, I think I had a panic attack. Dimly recall watching the thing soak up like 10 or 12 shots, then shoot into the forest like the Flash. I sat in the corner to recuperate, because I felt like a corpse. After about an hour or so I started feeling a little better, but I didn't feel completely better until the next day. Girlfriend sat with me all night because she's awesome, but the others set up rotating shifts. I still don't think anybody slept that night except for me. I passed out. Wake up in the morning feeling like P. Diddy after a drunken rampage through a car wash. Thin, finger-like bruises on my gun arm wrapping all the way around and down my arm, counted 6 or 7 fingers at least. Scared shitless. We noped the hell out of there and haven't been back since. Be in Humboldt County, CA, where there's a lot of acid as well as weed. Go in a woods by myself one night behind the college like 3 a.m. Trippin' balls and shit but still coherent. Come across things strewn, plastic bags, hammers. Have the feeling I'm being watched. Someone in front of me all of the sudden. I say, what are you doing out here so late? Pretty abruptly. The man has a shovel and hairnet on. He replies, what are you doing out here so late? We quietly passed each other on. To this day I know he wasn't growing pot because it was near the coast where the weather is horrible for that. Okay, no green text. Takes too long immo. Just got out of military. Got job with Dodd and moved into my girl's house. She had 2 kids that weren't mine. There were some deep woods next to her house, but there was a fence. I would leave every morning at 04. No problem. One morning I kissed her goodbye in her half-sleep and grabbed my lunch from the fridge. I walked out and shut the door. Before I could lock the door, I felt this nasty feeling. I turned around in alarm and I saw nothing. I couldn't take my eyes off a certain part of the woods. I was frozen. I had my keys in one hand and my lunch in the other. The only thing that was going through my head at the time was help. I had tears running down my face. I stood there for what seemed like hours. I never took my eyes off a certain part of the woods. I couldn't. Grown man that has thought he was able to take on anything was gone. I was having a full-on crybaby attack from fear. All of a sudden the girl's 6-year-old opened the door and held my hand and walked me to the car. Bye Anon, I love you. Tears all over me from scared. Left driveway. Called GF. She got up and found him staring out the glass door and she locked it and sent him to bed. Got home later and searched the wood for anything and found nothing. This story still scares me and makes me tear up.